Hi, it's Alan again with Josh Rudd this time, and Josh has been with the EIS and working within British Swimming as a performance lifestyle. I've known Josh for pretty much a year now, I guess, doing some work with our world-class podium potential athletes, and he's spot on with what he does. He looks after a wide range of athletes and a wide range of people within that. And so, hi Josh, how are you doing?
Good, yeah, very good. I'm just getting used to this new life that we're all living now.
Yeah, especially now we're going into week 4, isn't it? So,
Yeah.
So the athletes have asked the questions, and I'll hit you with number one. So, what made you take the route into the job that you do now?
So I guess, well, initially it's one of those roles that isn't very well known. I think when most people talk about sports science and sports medicine, it very rarely includes performance lifestyle. And even when you're in that setup, people kind of go, well, what is performance lifestyle? And I think for me, once I'd kind of got a grasp of, well, this is what it is, this is the sorts of things that we support with, it kind of became apparent that that might have been what I was already doing beforehand, just without the title. And I think for me, it was a kind of a natural progression that this role involves helping people. And to me, that was a massive part of it, that actually getting to help people and getting to see them grow as individuals is a really, really good thing for me, and something that I value as a person. So I guess that was the real kind of push for why I wanted to get into it. And yeah, we've probably, what am I, a year in now, and not really looked back and realised, hang on a minute, we're nearly a year, and where's that year gone? So it's been good. It's been good.
And what is the main purpose of what you do with the athletes? Is it one single area, or is it expanded over a wider range?
I mean, performance lifestyle is essentially, I try and explain it in its simplest terms, the jack of all trades and the master of none. We spread ourselves across so many different areas, and through the EIS we've probably got a group of about 35 of us that are specialists in all different areas, and we don't necessarily stick to just one particular topic, and I'm sure as the years go on and as performance lifestyle develops, it isn't just about one particular area. We've got some really good and some really strong knowledge bases through kind of education, through performance development and personal development stuff. We've got some great coaches that are in there. We've got people that are from HR, and they've been in HR for years. There's such a range and a varied group of us that it actually works really well, and we all feed off each other, that we can then offer that support to the swimming community.
And what needs do you cover with those? So if you have an athlete, what is it you predominantly go in, and what are the needs that you cover for them?
From a swimming perspective, it traditionally tends to be education. So a lot of that will support with their education needs. That might be, for example, exams. That might be timetabling. The transition route is a massive one as well, especially within education. Considering the ages of swimmers, we're still in the education pathway. So a lot of the guys will be doing their GCSEs, their A-levels. They might be transitioning up from A-levels to university. And there's a lot of support that comes around that. So it may be that actually they're considering where they want to train with swimming alongside where they want to study. It may be that they're trying to figure out what the right course is for them. It may be that they're trying to work out how they can best manage the two, and how they can best work swimming and studying. It's a real varied range of stuff that I would support with around that. And some of the guys have it. Some of the guys know exactly what they want to do. Equally, others know that they want to swim, but they kind of want something else on the side of it. So it's not always about education, but a lot of it, just given the demographic of the guys and girls that we're working with, tends to be that it's mostly the education pathway. That's not to say that we've also had career development stuff. There's support there around, and I've done a fair bit of work actually around agents as well. So supporting them with if they wanted to look for agents and sponsors. The EIS have got a really, really good track record and a bank of information that we can all use. And I think when I was saying about the other guys and the other advisors that work in different sports, there's a real good community there that if someone comes up with something and goes, oh, actually, I need some help with finding rent or finding accommodation somewhere, then if I'm not the expert on it, someone else in the group probably is, and I can tap into that resource. So it tends to be, back to your question, it tends to be education, a lot around the sponsorship stuff, managing your time, and then, if anything else crops up, then we tend to get involved with that as well.
And with swimmers being swimmers, or athletes being athletes, how many do you have that stop and they don't have a clue what they want to do next?
Less than, well, it's probably slightly more than I would want. But I think we've definitely got better, and over the years, there's seemed to be a bit of a shift into making sure that athletes that are retiring have a plan afterwards. Now, that plan hasn't got to be massive. That plan could be an idea. It could be, even if they haven't studied, it could be that they want to start studying. And I think that range and that variation within the swimming community is actually quite good, because we don't have one set route. My background wasn't swimming, and I noticed very quickly when I started that actually the swim coaching and the swimming pathway route for doing kind of, say, swim clinics or making little clubs is a big one. And to me, that's great, because that gives you some really good life skills in that. So managing young people, your time management and your development, starting a business, that's a massive one for someone that's trying to learn the skills that are needed in the away from the, I don't want to say the real world there, but it's in the world outside of swimming. Once you've stopped being a full-time athlete, or once you've stopped having swimming as your life, I think once people have found that other option or that other variation within it, they actually get a really good idea as to where they want to go. And you probably know as well, Alan, there's loads of athletes out there, or ex-athletes out there, that are doing some really good things that are in maybe some way related to swimming, maybe some way not related to swimming. And I think there's the beauty of what I do is that we've got so many different options and so many different routes that we could go down, that actually, if an athlete has put off studying, they can go and do that. If an athlete's decided they want to pursue a career in something that's in no way related to swimming, they've got the opportunity to do that now. And I think for me, once they finish, I think that's the real important stage. But actually, from my perspective, it's what have we done beforehand to support them into that point. I wouldn't want any athlete to finish on day one of being a retired swimmer and having no idea what they want to do. And I think that's a really important thing for everyone to consider, is that actually, if that conversation's starting around, well, I might be thinking about retiring, that's the prime time, if not slightly before that, to start thinking, what do I want to do after swimming? Because we don't get to retirement and then we just go straight into the world of work. We have to build through and transition into that. So I think that's a really important thing to remember with all of this, especially what's going on now. We're in uncharted waters, and no one really knows what's happening. Equally, athletes get injuries, equally athletes get ill, athletes get dropped from programs. Sometimes it's out of our control. And I think we have to prepare as best as we can for these situations, for unexpected situations, to make sure that we've got a plan or something to do afterwards. So less now that we've got the kind of the plans in place, and I really kind of push, look, think about what else outside of swimming. But yeah, there were probably a few that left the sport and didn't really know what they were up to or what they were going to do.
I know when I swam backender when I was swimming, I think the role wasn't necessarily in place for for that lifestyle support. And I think that when I was coming towards the end, I think I was an older athlete as well. So I was 27 going on 28 when I stopped. So I already knew, and I was mature enough to have to make the decision on my own. But I know that those 22, 23-year-olds just look at it as like they can be the Peter Pan of swimming and just keep going and going. And so totally agree.
I think that's a really important point as well, that when you're 27, 28, a lot of athletes don't get that opportunity. And a lot of them don't have that opportunity at 27, 28 to potentially keep swimming. I mean, yes, there are people out there, and like you said, the Peter Pan of swimming is the ideal for most. But I think we also have to be realistic, and we have to be rational that sometimes at 22, 23, that maybe just is the lifespan. And people have different options, and people have different opinions, and they fall out of love with it, and they want to just carry on forever. But I think, it's important to recognize that there is no end date sometimes, or you don't know when that end date's going to come. There is an end date, but you just don't know when it's going to happen. And I think if we can prepare ourselves as best as possible for that date when it arrives, then great.
Yeah, I love that. If you weren't doing this, what would you be doing?
That's a good question. So my degree and my background was sports science, but I did have, when I was studying, a really keen interest in concussion. So I did a fair bit of research when I was studying, and then a little bit afterwards around kind of concussion and brain injury and that kind of thing. So I kept thinking back, like, where would I be doing, or what would I be doing? And I think I'd probably, in an ideal world, I'd be in America somewhere doing some research on concussion with probably an NFL team or something like that. But it was kind of soon apparent that I'd probably need a fair bit of money if I wanted to go and study in America, and a fair bit of extra kind of resource to get out there. So I think it was an ideal, and then you soon realize the reality of life probably isn't going to get you to the dizzy heights of working in the NFL in America, being a researcher. and I didn't have a doctorate degree either, so that probably didn't
help. If you were a swimmer, like we have a lot of swimmers who have lived at home and move into a boarding facility and they swim on board, what would your advice be for them?
I think for me, preparation is key. So if you've maybe not been living away from home, or you've not really considered that as a thing beforehand, I think the biggest thing I would say is to try and prepare. I remember, even from my own experience, going to university was the first time I'd properly left home. And the really mundane things like learning to iron, learning to put a wash on, learning to do those things that for some of us we take for granted, and we've never done it before. And I'm sure there's probably a couple of swimmers that you work with, Alan, that maybe don't know how to turn the dishwasher on or use a washing machine. So I'd say try and prepare yourself for those kind of real life skill elements. So if it's a case of living at home with mum and dad, maybe ask them, can you show me properly how to iron? Or I'll tell you what, I'll do the tumble dryer, or learn how to work things that actually are just really mundane life skills, that when we get then to a situation where we're not living with someone that we can rely on, we just have to figure it out ourselves. And we just actually get a little bit of life experience in just understanding what it takes to live independently. So I would say, prepare as best as you can, learn what you can as soon as you can get it, really. And I also think just really consider actually what it is that you need. So that might not become apparent straight away. You might get to boarding and you might realize then, actually, I need help with this, or I need some support with this. But equally, you also might realize in yourself, well, I might need to develop some of these skills, or I might need to really understand what it means to be an independent person. And I think that's a really important thing to do beforehand, because what you can do there is you can really assess what it is that you need, and you can assess by the end of it what you've actually done and what you've actually learned. And I think just having that awareness and just thinking, writing it down, or really considering what it is that you need from that process is a really important thing to consider as well.
Yeah,
I'm fair push to say learn to make your own bed, because that one should already be there. But equally, I think there's some really good things in general life skills, in getting ahead, just getting ahead in terms of how can I be proactive, what can I do. There's also obviously a social element, and I think networking is an important part. You're going to be away from home, so that those home comforts, those things that you probably really enjoy when you're back home that you then realize you've not got, is a tough thing. But if you recognize it and you can sit down and you can understand that, I think that's half the battle. I think that's a really, really important step that you can be taking already.
Yeah, I agree. I think I think about 6 months before I left to go to Bath, I started learning to cook and clean and do there's things that I probably should have known before. If not, I think I'd have been in trouble. I'd have been one of those people living off beans on toast for the first 3 weeks. So it's really good advice there. Has the Olympics being cancelled thrown any curveballs with regards to like your athletes and that you work with, or have they all responded pretty well to the setbacks?
I'm just making a note there, because that's given me a big one, and I've had to underline it. University is a big one for this. So for me, through the performance lifestyle route, my role doesn't necessarily look specifically at performance of the athletes from a swimming perspective. What I will then look at, like I said just previously, is around the education routes, around the career development routes, where the transitions are at. The big one, obviously, in terms of transition at the moment is we're in a period where we thought we were going to have the Olympics, and then maybe the 4-year cycle plan might change. Actually, now we've got an extra year, and then we're going to go into a 3-year cycle. Well, that also then comes with some real practical issues that we have to look at. So, for example, university is a big one. If you've deferred your studies, for example, we've got some athletes that have deferred their studies because it's an Olympic year and they want to concentrate on training and making the Olympics. That's now the conversation has started now around, well, what are we going to do for next September? Providing we're back into an element of normality, what are we going to do with that? So is it another year of deferral? But then we get into complications with things like student finance, or actually having to complete your studies over a certain period of time. So that's a real challenge right now, just how we manage that aspect of it. Equally then, things like accommodation. So some of the athletes will have got contracts ready to go for August, September to study for their year. And actually they might not be studying, or they might have moved, or they might be doing something different. And that's another real kind of challenge for me, and then for the athletes as well, to try and support them with, is how do we look with that, and where do we go with that aspect? So I think there's a few areas that we've got that are really kind of still in the unknown. Agents is another one. A lot of them will run on contracts that go post Olympics. Well, does that mean an extra year of funding, or does that not mean an extra year of funding? The deals that a lot of people have will run until, say, the end of this year, that actually the Olympics hasn't happened. So what we would have potentially got from having an Olympic deal, is that going to get extended or not? The difficulty is like I said, we don't know what this situation is. So a lot of the time, the answers that people get from agents, from sponsors, from landlords, from university degree or lecturers is just unclear. And I think especially now, we're just trying to keep an open mind with things, just trying to see what it is that we can do and what we can keep within our control, which is an important part of a lot of this. What can we control, and what can we plan for and work out what to do at the end of it? That might be contingencies as well. That might be extra options, a plan B. If we can get it, then great. There's a real difficulty at the moment. I mentioned just with universities and people deferring studies, there's a real uncertainty around people that are coming from A levels to university. if you're going on predicted grades, which is what the government might be saying around predicted grades as opposed to actual exams, then that might call into a real kind of difficulty with, are the predicted grades what I wanted to go to that institution? Am I actually not going to get in there? There's a real element of uncertainty, and I think it's just trying to have that open-mindedness and that option to go, right, maybe a bit of what if planning. What if I don't get into there? What if I can't get that accommodation that I wanted? What if my sponsorship doesn't run until after the Olympics now in 2021? And I think it's just having that element of open-mindedness and trying to just remember what we can and can't control, because at the end of the day, we can't control those sorts of things. We can only act in the best possible way to try and resolve them.
Yeah, I like that. And because we're fortunate as a program in that we because it was so close proximity to the boarding and the food halls and the swimming pool, is we eradicate a lot of the issues that they have. But there are periods where we're asking a lot of them from their training aspect, but we're also getting a lot being asked of them from an academic aspect as well. So what would you advise of that? Would it be routine or timetabling, or how would you advise to get everything or the best out of it?
I think from this situation especially is routine is key. I think routine is a really important aspect of just being in an unknown situation. So a lot of the time we have a routine. We get up first thing in the morning, we go and swim, we go and study for the day, and then we go back and swim. That's our routine. And actually what we don't have now is that constant of swim, study, swim. So I think in that time, we just have to adapt, and we just have to look at new ways that we can build in a routine of some description. So if it means that you still want to get up at 5:30, whatever you might want to do, then great. I mean, for the athletes, if that's something that they want to do and they want to train first thing in the morning, then brilliant, because it keeps that routine and it gives them an element of control again with what they're doing. So equally, I know from experience and from what some of the athletes are doing is they're all getting together at the same time that they would have done their gym program during the week, and they do it either on a video call, they'll do it just on an open mic kind of session, and they'll just run it like they were doing it, but not together. And I think adding that element of routine and keeping that connection together is a really important part of this. I think when we're talking about studies as well, we may still have people that are studying right now, but they're just doing it remotely, whether that's university, whether they're doing some kind of project work or coursework that they still need to submit. I think again, there's a really important part there of making sure that you've got a routine, that you know when you're going to do it, and not just getting up at any old time. I might do an hour of that now. If we can plan it, then that's brilliant, because it gives us structure and it gives us something to be getting up for, to be working on. And it's amazing how quick the day can go with that sort of thing. But it also gives you an element of just keeping some sense of normality. I did a piece a couple of weeks ago for British Swimming, and it was around how we keep routine and we keep structure in our days. And one of the pointers that I'd put was around actually making sure that you've got a workspace. I think some of us sometimes neglect the fact that, right, if I'm going to do some work, then I'm just going to sit there in front of the telly and I'm going to put my laptop on my lap and I'm just going to be as productive as I can while something's going on behind me. And actually, that's not always the most productive. And what I suggested to people was to maybe think about where they would feel most productive, and equally where they can maybe detach that work from a bit of wind down. So, for example, I said if you've got a desk, then great. If you've got a dining room table even that you can set up as a little workspace, then even better, because that gives you a clear place of which you're working from. And then when you're not being very productive, you leave that area and you come back to it when you're ready to come back to it. So things like that we can really keep a sense of normality going if we can, but we just have to adapt it to make it a little bit more productive and make it a little bit more useful. So yeah, there's lots of things that we can do, but I also don't want to be too prescriptive and say you got to do this because that will make you productive. You've got to find what works for you, and I think that's the real key to all of this, is just find out where you think, actually, I know I'm not very good at doing work in the morning, so I'm going to make sure I plan in my day from 10 onwards, let's say, for example. Equally, if you're an early bird and you want to get up at 5 and then you've started your day at 6, it might mean that you're finished by 3 or 4 and you get to enjoy the rest of the afternoon. So just find out what works for you. That's what I'd say is most important.
Yeah, I can't agree. Can't agree any more than that. I just showed this to Josh as well. I said my alarm's still the same as what it was when I was coaching. So I've just continued that through. And I don't like getting up early in the morning, but I've found that keeping that routine in my life has made it to a degree quite simple. So, and that's just me as an individual. And like Josh has said there, everyone's different. Another one around kind of timetabling, I guess, or maybe the pressures of external stuff as well, is it's a difficult period for a lot of us around that May time, because we know either exams are there or exams are coming up. But in addition, we also have the qualification windows. So it's a bit of a strenuous time for the athletes. Any advice on that? Is it plan long term, like start revising early, or is it, again, could be individual, I guess?
I don't like to I don't like to always say this because it doesn't come from a place that I actually did, unfortunately. But I think if I've learned anything, just really think about when you get given coursework, when you get given deadlines, that's the deadline. And actually, if you've got that piece of work 12 weeks ago and the deadline is, say, May or June, I think it's really important that you have to prepare those for that forward planning is so important. So if you know that you've got 2 or 3 exams at the start of June, and you've also got 2 or 3 coursework deadlines at the start of June, and you've also got swimming or major competitions at the start of June, getting ahead of that really early is important. Now, in an ideal world, once you get given your assignment or once you get given some revision to do, you do it and it sits there and then you can keep it. I know personally that I wasn't that great at doing it, and I wasn't that great, but what I was good at is planning what I would do and when. So I know that, okay, all right, I've been given 12 weeks, but me personally, I probably was 4 weeks before the end of the deadline. Actually really consider, if I've got loads of these bunching at the same time, what else or what can I be doing beforehand to make sure it isn't as stressful at that really, really busy period. So if it means you're just getting 200 words done in an evening or in a day, then great. You've planned it, you've got it there. If it means you've got to do a bit of reading, when am I going to do that reading? Factor that into the day, or actually plan that as an hour. It sounds really simple, but there's a brilliant app on people's phones called a calendar. And the calendar works wonders, because if you actually write things in, it will remind you and you can use it all the time. And I think people, we neglect it, or we don't update it, or we don't follow it. But actually, if we've got it written down and then we see it, we can go, oh, hang on a minute, that's part of my day. This is what I need to do. Equally, if you want to go back to an old-fashioned diary, there's a few of us that are, well, not me, but there's a few of the guys that I work with that bring this diary, and they pull it out of their bags and they go, well, hang on, let me just put that in my diary. And I go, I'm amazed that you've still got a diary, but equally brilliant, because you're planning it and you're writing it down and you're putting it in there, so you know that you've got some element of structure to it. So I think that's a really big one around those really busy periods, is what can we do to prepare best, and equally to kind of shift some stuff away from that bunch of exams or coursework. And if we can get rid of it, or if we can shuffle it back a little bit, it doesn't feel as hard when we get into that period of time. Equally, it's always going to be a busy period, so we just need to manage that as well. If it means that we need to be proactive, proactiveness is a great one. If we can be a bit proactive with people and we can say, look, I can't go out tonight, or I'm not going to spend an hour playing Call of Duty. I'm going to actually concentrate on doing this, because it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks of a really busy time. Then after that, it will be great. So I think just trying to be proactive, trying to prepare as best we can before we get into that period, are 2 really useful things to think about.
Yeah, great advice. How do you, as coaches, see times? They see places, they see finishes. How do you measure your success with an athlete?
That's you've kind of hit the existential performance lifestyle question on its head there, Alan. That's how do we know that we've done well? I think for me, and this is me just talking personally, I value an athlete that can go through a program or go through a transitional period and look back on it and go, do you know what? That was relatively smooth, all things considered. And I think that for me is a real measure of success. I mean, sometimes, and we joke about this a couple of times, actually for me to see if an athlete's done well is 10 years after they've retired and that they've actually got a good family, a good job, a good lifestyle. Yeah, that's great, but actually what can we do in the tangible time now? And I would say that, yeah, how can we make those transitional periods as smooth as possible? And if we've done that, then brilliant.
Yeah, excellent. We had Kerry-Anne Payne on a couple of weeks ago, and she said that. She said pretty much she stopped swimming, went into the real world, and there was no change really in that. She was ready for it, and she just got on with it, and that hits the nail on the head. Have you worked in other sports? And if you have, are there any differences in the athletes? Swimmers are a little bit weird, we know that.
It's a rare breed, yeah. So my sporting background was in football. So I used to be a football referee for about 10 years, and it was complete kind of, was useless at playing still, but I loved it. So what else could I be doing? And I kind of got to a decent level where actually I was kind of doing some good games, and I was going out and going to some good grounds. But football in itself is a relative kind of enigma of sport, and it's its own little world, and it sits there while everyone else is doing their thing. So in terms of actually taking much away, especially from refereeing as well, you couldn't take much away from refereeing and swimming, I don't think. But if there was anything it taught me, it was that especially from a refereeing perspective, you have to be alert and aware to everything that goes on around you. You just have to, your communication skills have to be up there, your teamwork, your discipline of yourself, and the ability to keep your own self in check is a really, really important part of it. And I think I definitely value the skills that I learned through that have taken me kind of into this role and into life in general. I think the other bit around what potentially could we draw in, I've done some work with, I used to work in universities before I started this job, and I've done some work with some real range of sports really, one of which was a para swimmer, so I've got I had a bit of an idea when I first started. But I think just the range of sports and the range of different things that each sports are doing, and even for example, for swimming in itself is relatively unique, that people are up early in the morning and they're training straight away. There are some sports that do that, but not many of them. Equally, now that we're in this situation, most sports might be able to carry on with some element of training as normal. Whereas for us and for the swimming guys, we can't get in a pool and we can't actually swim. So we have to adapt and we have to try and change that area. So I definitely say, if I've learned anything from other sports, it's that everyone has their different little nuances and ways of doing things, but actually there's a really important collectiveness there, that we all kind of have a main goal together, which is to just figure it out and achieve something that's really important. And I like that actually we all do very, very different things, and we all do very different sports, but actually there's kind of a main goal there that sport as a collective just kind of makes us want to do good and it makes us feel good about ourselves, doesn't it? When we're competing, when we're training, when we've got something to aim for. I think that's the collectiveness across all the sports that I've worked in, is that I really see people that want to achieve something and to do good.
Excellent. You've answered my number 14 earlier on, which is fine. But the last one then would be, have you got any advice for the Titan swimmers during this period out?
Yes, I think for me, this situation provides a real opportunity for us. And this is probably me being biased from a performance lifestyle perspective, but there's a real opportunity here that we can all, every one of us, not just swimmers, everybody in society can focus on something else and shift our gaze onto something else. Now, it doesn't mean that we're spending however many hours training in a pool. What it does mean is we've got that time and that opportunity to focus our minds onto something else. Now, obviously, I spoke about transition and I spoke about all these different areas that performance lifestyle covers. What we can do in this time is a really good example of what else is beyond swimming. And I think that's something to really consider. And it's an opportunity for us to get that time to go, right, let me take stock of where I've come from. What have I been up to? Let me see where I'm at now. This is what the situation is. Okay, we don't know how long we're going to be in this situation, but if anything, that gives us even more of an opportunity to say, look, let me make use of this time, however long that might be. And then what we can do is we can look forward and we can go, where do I want to be in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months time? What is it that I want to achieve? And I think if I've learned anything out of this, it's to just take stock of where we're at currently. And it might get a little bit deep and it might get a little bit philosophical for you, but I think you just have to just realize this is where we're at, and no one's chosen this. No one's decided that this is what's going to happen and everyone's going to stop now and that's it. But we've got an opportunity to make use of it. And I think it's just reframing that to think this isn't a negative opportunity. This is a positive opportunity that we can really concentrate on something else. So I know a couple of the guys that I've worked with are looking at personal development. I'm running a session just after this call on developing your CV. So some guys haven't got CV, so we're going to do some of that, which is great because that gives us an opportunity to identify some areas that we could develop, whether it be for 6 weeks, for 12 weeks, however long left we've got in this time. So yeah, I'd really say, if anything, just take stock of where you are. Just think about what you're doing and what you've done, and then really consider what it is that you want to do. What maybe do you want to get out of this period? What do you want to get out of the next 6, 12, 18 months? I think that's a really, really important thing to think about.
Yeah, really good. And make sure, I think all of us guys, make sure that we use the advice that's been given here, because there's some really good insights into development as a swimmer, but also as a person there. And I think another key word that Josh has just said again that we've heard on numerous occasions here is opportunity, and we do all have really good opportunities in this. So a massive thank you, Josh. Stay safe during this period and look after yourself.
Will do. Thank you very much, Alan, and best of luck for all of your swimmers as well.